This is a habit that I've been implementing for a couple months now, and it's completely transformed the way I approach my art studies as well as my personal projects. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name is Julie, I am an online art student, and in this channel I share my journey with you. And today I want to talk about having a studio journal, why I think you should have one, how I've been doing it, and a few different approaches that you could take. It is extremely important if you're an art student, whether in an art school or online or using different resources, to take notes. This isn't natural to me, and it is something that I have to force myself to do. It's super important because I can start to notice, now that I've been studying for a year and a half, I forgot a lot of the things that I watched. So you could take notes while you're watching a YouTube video, reading a book and things like that. For me, the most important learning points don't necessarily happen as I am consuming content, watching a lesson, but rather when I am trying to do something myself, when I am facing a problem and suddenly there is like a light bulb that goes on and I have these big realizations that are a lot more powerful than just having an information given to you, because it is the solution to a problem that I've been facing myself. So I could be working on an assignment, I could be working on a personal project, and suddenly as I am doing something, I could think about a sentence that I heard during a lesson, or make a new connection between things that I've learned in the past, or just have a new idea myself that I don't necessarily relate to a teacher or to a lesson or a class. Something happens in my brain, and this happens to me recently because I have a big project. I am working on a series of master studies from a book called Nature Drawing and Design. The point isn't just to make a drawing, it is to learn something from what you are copying or studying. I was working on the pencil stage of this plate, and I had a couple realizations. I thought that, wow, S-curves are actually looking more beautiful when they're uneven, so when one part of the curve is different from the other part, and I was taking notes about how to make it uneven, different ways that it can be uneven, why it is more beautiful, and seeing where I noticed it in the plate that I was copying. It is a very important learning point, but it's also something that would be extremely easy to just go through my mind and forget about. If I didn't have a place to write it down and a moment, kind of a ritual dedicated to writing this down, I know that it would be extremely easy to just forget about it, and maybe in a couple weeks, maybe in a couple years, I would be having the same realization again and thinking, wow, I think I learned this in the past, but I had forgotten about it. This is a very common experience and something that I've had many times, and it's just unnecessarily slowing down my learning, which is why I now take religious notes in my studio journal. As you may know, I study art with New Masters Academy, and I am very lucky to be part of their 2-year program, which started in September. When it was starting, we had a few meetings and events to get us started and all of that, just like you would in a regular art school, and they told us to keep a studio journal and insisted on how important it is. And I believe it was for me the first time that I heard about this concept, and it got me thinking about what it could do for me, how this would fit into my current note-taking system for my classes, my current sketchbook system, and everything that I've been doing, because it is a new habit, it has to serve a purpose, and I realized that there was a purpose for me, there was a good reason for me to start this, and that was, one, to get a chronological view of everything that I'm doing, because I take classes and do assignments, and I also have a few personal projects and commissions, and I'm also working on master studies, I'm also sometimes sketching outside. All of these things are done with different mediums, on different papers, they live in different places. I didn't have a chronological view of everything that I'm doing. It is a very useful way to reflect on a specific period of my learning or my journey, because because it isn't everything just doesn't live in isolation, but what I'm doing with my assignments informs what I'm doing with my personal projects, and same the other way around. And being able to see everything would allow me to relate things better, to reflect more efficiently, and to take more out of everything. It is also for me, since I have this YouTube channel and I make what I call my art journal. So once a month I come in front of the camera and I talk about everything that I've been doing during a month. It is an excellent way for me to keep track of this, because before that it was really a pain to find everything that I had been doing. And finally, I thought that having a studio journal would be an excellent way for me to take and have a place dedicated to notes about my process, about personal feelings around a piece, like how was I feeling when I was drawing this, what did I use, what materials, what kind of paper, what exact ink did I use for a specific piece. I have a place now to write this down, as well as, of course, the most important part, which is the learning points that I get from a drawing. I'm going to give you a few different options that you could use if you want to have a studio journal as well. For me, I decided to use an app for this. I know that handwritten notes are better for memory and all of that, but the thing is that I'm working on different kinds of paper, different pieces that physically can't be in the same place in a chronological order. And I also want my studio journal not to be just a written journal. I want to have pictures, at least, of the piece that I'm talking about to be able to remember it more easily. And for this reason, having a digital studio journal made a lot of sense for me. I didn't want to use my notes app that I'm using to take my assignments notes and my lessons notes. Yeah, because it isn't ideal, it isn't exactly the same thing, and I decided to use Day One. Day One is a journaling app that isn't meant especially for artists, but I had been using it in the past just for keeping a personal journal. It allows me to add images and other things attached to an entry. It allows me to have tags, and it automatically gives the date, and so it was the most efficient and what would allow me to have this chronological view that I was after, as well as having some organization system that would be easy to change using the tags on a daily basis. After my drawing session, I will scan the piece or take a photograph or export it if it's digital when I'm working in Procreate, for example, and I will force myself, it is really not a natural thing to me, but I create an entry in Day One for this drawing session, for this piece that I'm working on. I prefer to have one entry per piece if I'm working on a few different pieces during the same day. For example, if I make a master study in the morning and then in the afternoon I do an assignment for a class at New Masters Academy, those would be two different entries. I will just add the picture, the relevant tags, give it a title, very simple, such as, for this, Nature Drawing and Design Plate 8, and I force myself to take a few notes. So these include, depending on the pieces, what materials I've been using, so which kind of ink, which exact pen, especially if I'm using a fountain pen, and most importantly, and this starts even during the process as I'm drawing now, it's becoming more and more natural after doing this for a couple months, I try to find something in the drawing process that I learned and take a note about it. It can be as simple as make sure you are looking at the correct leaf when you're copying a leaf. So I was working on this plate with a plant and noticed myself copying a leaf, not looking at the right one. So it can be as simple, as basic as this, or it can be a deeper realization like the one I had about curves and what makes an S-curve more beautiful in my opinion. Just try to take this note. Allows me, one, to remember about it, because it is very difficult sometimes to put a realization about drawing into words, but for me it makes it stick better in my memory. Also, the very fact that as I'm drawing I know that at the end of the session I will create an entry and I will take notes. It's making me more active during the process, and it's making me notice things that I wouldn't necessarily notice otherwise, and think to myself, okay, I just had this realization, I just saw this small thing, and I will take a note of it in my entry after this drawing session. Before I tell you about a few different options that you could use to have a studio journal, I have a small announcement to make. I am currently working on a big project that will potentially allow me to share a lot more of my my process with you. I don't want to tell too much about it because this is going to take a few months, but when I'm ready to release it, I will have a very special offer for people who are subscribed to my newsletter. So if you like what I share here and you think you could be interested, it would be an excellent moment to subscribe to my newsletter, and you would also get my free sketching kits guide that you receive automatically when you subscribe to my newsletter. So the link will be in the description below. Back to Studio Journal, a few different things that you could use are Notes app, so you could use Microsoft Notes, I don't know how it's called, Apple Notes, or Google also has something like this. There are a lot of different Notes apps that usually sync extremely well across devices. Everyone has their favorite. I use Apple Notes because it's working extremely well with all of my devices, but yeah, you could use any of these really. Have a folder called Studio Journal or whatever you want to call it, and create a note per entry, and this is, I believe, going to automatically always keep track of the creation date for the note, and so you're going to have this chronological thing and you would be able to attach pictures and scans and anything that you want in there. Also, you have tags, so a lot of what I have with Day One you would have in this as well. If even a Notes app seems a little bit too much for you, just use Microsoft Word or Apple Pages or Google's version for this. Again, you would have different options, so you could make one document per entry. That would make a lot of documents. I'm not a fan of this, but whatever works for you. Or you could decide to have one document per month, per week, per whatever works really. A few things that personally I would make sure of is that it syncs well across devices. If you're using at least two things, like if you have a computer and a smartphone, make sure that it's working well in both, that it's syncing automatically. For me, it is important because establishing a new habit isn't easy, and I want to make sure that no friction is going to happen between me and making entries in my Studio Journal. So if it doesn't sync well, if the app doesn't work well in one device, it's not ideal. I personally prefer to write anything from my computer and using an actual keyboard rather than being on my phone like this, and I am more likely to take notes on my computer, which is why I decided not to use Apple Journal. That is a journaling app native on the iPhone. It's been there for a few updates. I don't use this because it doesn't work. It's like not available on my computer, it's not available on my tablet, and that's a no for me. So that's your digital options. If you're more into paper and you want a paper option, you could either decide that your main sketchbook is going to be where your Studio Journal lives, so you would take notes in your sketchbook. Maybe you're already doing something like this. You could also just get a new sketchbook. It's always nice to have a reason to get a new sketchbook, and decide that this is going to be your Studio Journal and you would take notes in this sketchbook. And yeah, maybe try to have a way to reference which drawing you're talking about, like taking note about my study for this painting that is going to live in this box, I don't know. Or you could make a small drawing of what you're talking about in the sketchbook. Again, if you want to have a visual element in your Studio Journal, you could make a small thumbnail of the drawing in question, or make diagrams, small sketches, or even print on sticky paper a picture of what you're talking about. If you have already this habit of scanning your work or taking picture of your work, and that's, I believe, a very good habit to have. I'm not into doing this on paper for a few reasons, although I love the look of handwritten notes, but for me, having this Studio Journal is fitting into a larger system that I started to implement a couple months ago, and it's been working extremely well for me. I have been drawing more, I have been using better paper for the kinds of drawings that I want to do, and yeah, it's just been great for me. So if you're curious about it, I made an entire video about what I use instead of a sketchbook and this system. I will leave a link right now if you want to check it out. Thank you so much for watching, keep drawing, and I will see you in the next one.